Hi, everyone. Welcome to our annual reading for the Poetry Apprenticeship. Thanks for spending the evening with us. I don't have a lot of comments to make as we get started because I want to leave the bulk of the time for the poets to share their own work. And I've prepared a little introduction for each that I'm hoping to read. I do want to begin just by saying that it's unfortunate one of our number, Andrea Duarte Alonso, is unable to join us this evening due to a scheduling conflict. But I wanted to take a moment at the start of our reading to acknowledge what an ambitious, courageous, and tender person that Andrea is and how much we all gain by having her as part of our cohort. Her work is centered on many themes, among them family, identity, inheritance, and her role as a very dedicated high school teacher. Fellow cohort member Susan Marie Swanson writes of her work, "One of the stories that poet Andrea Duarte Alonso has to tell is about living in rural Minnesota farm country, the daughter of immigrants from Mexico, beginning and continuing the work and the love of her adult life in the place her hardworking parents have called home. Somehow the teenager smile that once, quote, cracked away all my youthful problems doesn't have the same effect for a young woman in her late 20s, working as a teacher and appreciating the gifts of the land. In her honest and engaging poems, she starts to make her way." Andrea wanted to wish her fellow poets good luck tonight with their readings and asked me to read a little statement. It says, "To start, I would like to thank the Loft, Gretchen Marquette, those who support the Loft and artists, and my poet peers. This experience has deepened my love for poetry in community. The program led by the kind and amazing poet Gretchen has helped me grow as a poet and storyteller. I have gained new styles and techniques to strengthen the pieces that I look forward to one day publishing. I wouldn't have a chapbook without the program, and I'm very thankful for that." So just wanted to make some space in the room tonight for Andrea. So I'm pleased to kick things off in earnest with our first reader, Lisa Friedman. In working with Lisa over the last year, I found a poet who was always eager to dig into elements of craft, a generous and curious reader of the collections of others, and a courageous explorer of the full range of human emotions. Her work developed intensely over the course of the year, and she, like all cohort members this year, was incredibly prolific, writing the bulk of her book in the last 12 months. Lisa's poignant manuscript, Portrait with Little Sister, wrestles with grief found in the aftermath of the loss of her beloved sister and a consideration of her place in her family and the world at large. The recurring setting of 1970s New York is vividly and faithfully rendered, as are the portraits of the people who are lucky enough to be known and loved by Lisa. Fellow cohort member Nissa Valdez writes, "Lisa wonders at the permanence of death and the bounds that we're born into and hold us in tight family trees. She circles around both the soundness and fragility of memory. Quote, 'You live only in my memory. It is unsafe here, a battleground where you are in constant retreat. I want to lock you in a box where new memories won't intrude.'" Please welcome Lisa Friedman.
Hi, everybody. I guess people can see me, so I'm not going to worry. Thank you, Gretchen, for your very kind words. I wanted to start with a couple of brief thank yous. I wanted to thank my husband, Jim, for his support and encouragement this past year. Jim mostly reads annual reports and newspapers and biographies, but he's become a really terrific and thoughtful reader of poetry. I also want to thank my daughters, Franny and Addie, just for being who you are, and hopefully one day you'll enjoy seeing yourselves in print. I also wanted to thank my fellow cohort members, Andrea, Dawn, Gabby, Jane, Nissa, Salim, and Susan Marie. We are a motley crew with distinct voices, and I've appreciated sharing my work with you, reading yours, and being in creative community with you. And Gretchen, this year has been just outstanding because of you. You're a masterful teacher of craft, an incisive and encouraging reader, and simply an awesome human being. I want to dedicate this reading tonight to my father-in-law, Jerry Harris, who writes beautiful poetry and has been my literary partner in crime for nearly 25 years. And finally, thank you all for coming and the law for hosting this reading tonight. The first 4 poems I'm going to read are about my sister Jennifer, who, as Gretchen mentioned, passed away. It'll be 3 years ago in March. The first poem is called Prayer for Atonement. Since you left, I have held you close and I have abandoned you. I have felt your nearness in darkness. I have created memories that fill spaces once yours. I have leaned on grief as a trusted friend. I have been lifted by music you will never hear. I have struggled with a loneliness equal to our love. I have tasted joy free of guilt. I have walked and found few answers. I have celebrated without you. I have tended to this loss and neglected love. I have wrestled with a rage that may yet break me. I have moved on. I have stood still. Proxies. I conjure you in my dreams. We are young again, laughing, cleverly flirting with a handsome waiter, but the laughter catches. Still your illness sits at the edge of our words. I bring you into conversations. My sister was a religion major, I say, who fully doubted God's existence. I slip you in when it fits and when it doesn't. A gently hostile reminder of your absence. I share fragments of you with Ella. Your morning sickness ended with her birth. You wore flowery skirts with striped tank tops in college. Puberty turned your hair curly. Your nickname as a child was Little. I listened to your playlist. Decisive, expansive, your songs pull me inside Nina Simone's breathtaking achings, Dylan's wide-eyed ramblings, Jagger's swaggering laments. Are those your cries for relief and Sister Morphine? I look at photographs. A favorite is one with Franny and Ella, age 3 and 4, laughing in your lap by the pool. Hair flat with damp, lips blue with cold. They are wrapped together in a towel, your loving arms wide around them. I wear your clothes. Your batik cotton blouse, the white one patterned with turquoise circles, holds summer souls pushing hot sand, wet grassy walks, fireflies igniting our dusk, late night confessions. I talk to you. I wish you'd answer the call, or that I could see you in the morning dove resting too long on our fence, or in the purple lupine surprise blooming in our garden. If only I believe the morning dove gifted us the lupine seed when we buried you last spring, returning now to admire her work. My sister had an amazing laugh, and this next poem is my attempt to capture it. Laughter. I can't count or order the losses of your death, but your laugh, exalted, cuts deep. I strain to hear it, a jackpot winning sound, lifting, lightning, soul filling, the sound of absolute acceptance. The film now muting, your mouth wide open, teeth and tongue exposed to show unrestrained bursting, not a climbing to crescendo, a joke, the prompt, or some observed absurdity, the sound a contagion, beckoning all to join your laugh, so hard it hurts us now. December. Then it's your birthday again, and you died today or yesterday. I'm alone and outside time. This next poem is my attempt at a nature poem. It's called How Squirrels Revel in Waste. A tree abundant with fledgling life, branches bending from the weight of unripe apricots. I count 109 on a single limb, my tally of a harvest that might have been. This morning, 1-foot soldier sat on the fence, his thumbless paws holding fruit to mouth, though he stopped chewing when we met, a standstill, until I clapped 3 times and shouted, "Ha!" which forced a sudden retreat, and another dead one dropped to the ground. It's been 20 years since we chose a sheltered, sunny corner for the tree, turned and fed the soil, watered, then watched her spindly roots thicken into a trunk that budded limbs, then branches, white blossoms bloomed, which soon bore fruit. I want to claim ownership of her bounty. Even tried netting her one year, but they clawed through her veil and again forced me to share what's mine. I'd feel less incensed if they'd learn patience, but no, always, always so much green waste. An enraged neighbor sat on his porch one spring with a BB gun to show the squirrels who's boss. But after firing a few shots, he lost his appetite for killing, collected the slain, and threw them in the compost heap. This poem is about my father, whom I love and admire. It's called My Cow's Eye. For Miss Durham's second grade show and tell, my father brought home a special treat from his lab, a cow's eye floating in a jar of formaldehyde. An ophthalmologist's daughter, I was raised on slides of eyes projected onto the white of our dining room wall as my father prepared for his lectures. Some were thin slices of waxed malignancies, magnified into circular swirling abstractions of pale purple rivers. Others were clearly human faces, obstructed by lids overgrown with bulbous pink vegetation. I stared bravely, demonstrating my advanced disposition. I hadn't asked for the cow's eye, but was thrilled to have it, never considering the hollow socket of its former owner or how it had arrived in the jar. I wanted my classmates to appreciate the eye's hugeness and all it had seen before. The eye was so much more than a teddy bear or a baseball card. Miss Durham, tall, soft-spoken, and strictly vegetarian, wore her long blonde hair in twin braids that reached the top of her corduroy pants. When I showed her my eye, she jerked her head away and ran with it to a black back closet where it stayed in the dark the rest of the day. My father had once offered Miss Durham a ride to school from a field trip, where I witnessed him shyly over-smiling. With the cow's eye, he badly miscalculated, thinking it would impress his harmless crush. Instead, it returned home unseen in a brown paper bag. And I returned home morose and forlorn. Ever nonplussed, my father said, I guess they're not for everyone. My next poem starts with an epigraph, which is a quote from Ocean Vuong, who's a brilliant contemporary poet. This quote came from an interview I heard with him on NPR. He says, "Grief is perhaps the last and final translation of love. And I think, this is the last act of loving someone. And you realize that it will never end. You get to do this, to translate this lacked act of love for the rest of your life." Ghosts. It is a room small enough to insist on intimacy, or at least constant proximity. With arms and legs outstretched, our fingers and toes touch from our beds, yours against the wall by the window, mine by the door. We are laughing tears, drunk from spinning clockwise, counterclockwise, until a sharp corner of my dresser jumps out and hits your forehead. Blood spills everywhere, but no stitches, only Band-Aids, though I still feel guilty. At a blue and red play kitchen with a white plastic bowl for a sink, we pretend to wash hands and rinse vegetables for soups. Bowing plywood shelves are piled high with toys, board games, books. I read to you. We share a little round table for coloring and crafts. A paper mache ice cream cone with a double scoop of chocolate hangs from a ceiling corner. At night, we close our door and snap the metal shade shut. We whisper goodnight and together fall asleep to city sirens. My last poem is called Where Are You Now? 4 scenarios. 1. Your soul, unencumbered and limitless, roams freely among the living while we stay clay-like and clumsy, bound and decaying. You slip through walls and shuttered windows for nighttime calls we won't remember, passing pore, blood, and bone to read the secrets hidden in our hearts, minds, and smallest cells. 2. You are the mourning dove who eyes me from the back fence. You have built a home of twigs and twine high in our Japanese maple. I see your elegance in flight. Your white-tipped, tapered tail reminds me of the long, strong legs that held you upright, but kept you to the ground. 3, in heaven, Grandma Essie calls you my darling and holds your hand. 4, you live only in my memory. It is unsafe here, a battleground where you are in constant retreat. I want to lock you in a box where new memories won't intrude, where I can find you and let our story wash over me. But there is no box impenetrable, open only to me. Only these words stay constant, insufficient, removed, but they must suffice. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Lisa. You're a beautiful reader.
Thank you.
I think one of the toughest parts of doing these readings over Zoom, I mean, there are gifts, right? There's 100 people in the room from all over the country, being able to be here supporting each other. Lisa, for example, lives in California, so we wouldn't have had her in our cohort if we were all in person, but it is tough doing these readings and then not being able to hear everyone's applause or see how it's affecting people. But for everyone reading tonight, just know that people are really being moved in all their little places, wherever they are. So thanks again, Lisa. That was really beautiful. Our next reader tonight is Salim Hugh Penny. Salim is a mutual aid advocate and disability justice activist. He practices cultivating ecosystems of care, centering melanistic wonderment. Salim regularly collaborates on community engagement activities, particularly for teen parent-headed families, long-term pediatric patients, and families affected by incarceration. Salim's manuscript, In Progress, is a rich, dynamic work that feels like a garden in a constant state of bloom. Salim worked hard this year in both poetry and prose, wrote Haibun, Golden Shovels, and other new and inherited forms, created his own successful nonce forms, experimented with visual poetry, and strove to constantly enrich his own life and that of his cohort members with poetry readings, articles, podcasts, and notices of contests and publications. I admire how gracefully he navigates the worlds of private writer and public poet, and how he manages a busy schedule, including, among many other worthwhile tasks, parenting his beloved school-aged twins. I always left my meetings with Salim feeling truly excited for him and all he was accomplishing, as well as for his future readers who can't imagine what kind of gift is in store. Cohort member Susan Marie writes, Salim Hugh Penny's poetry welcomes us. His poems lead us into spaces where hunger coexists with nourishment, longing with connection, confusion with vivid truth, grief with great love. Reading his musical, rhythmic phrases and sentences, I'm swept up in his project of cultivating a rural hip-hop blues aesthetic. I'm moved by the way he brings me along, challenging me with both complexity, dense language, intricate forms, human failures, and warmth, treasured history, genuine voices, family bonds. What trees, birds, streets, and gardens are waiting for me on the next page? What injury, what healing? I feel lucky to be entering the world of each poem. Please welcome Salim Hugh Penny.
Thanks so much, Gretchen. Hey, good people. My name is Salim Hugh Penny. Pronouns are he, him, and friend. By way of a brief visual description, Black man with a mustache, red sweatshirt with a black vest, partially visible cochlear implant. Behind me is a Lego table with a new Harry Potter set that a neighbor did because I don't have the patience for 993 pieces. Okay, grandparents, thank you. I think you're on the call. I'm going to share one long poem, and if there's time, I'll do a shorter one, but I think I'm just going to try to do one long one. And I want to thank Gretchen for being supportive of the experimentation or the experimenting that I've been able to do over this last year, to just be able to say, all right, this week I want to try such and such form, and know that somebody's going to be like, okay, maybe we'll work on that, and or to just be like floored and be like, you better keep that in the TBD book. So I want to thank Gretchen for that exploration. And then I also want to thank my cohort. There are times when I came in and times when I just dropped out and times when I tried my best to be present but couldn't. And I appreciate folks rolling with that and understanding sometimes the poems come when they come, and that's just kind of what life has been like, especially in this pandemic season. For accessibility, I am going to pivot my camera to a document so that folks can see it. Although we have the AI closed captioning of Zoom, it doesn't necessarily catch vernacular and alternate spellings. And then lastly, the content warnings or content notes, as I tend to say, I will alert people of those by the pages that I'm reading. I put a star in the corner indicating that there is going to be a content note on that page. And the content notes primarily in this poem involve bullying, anti-Black violence, and some alluded to physical violence, but none described. All right, and with that, let's pivot cameras and let's party. All right, I gotta just change the direction of this real quick. Yeah, there we go. All right, awesome. I'm gonna pin myself so I can see.
It looks great.
Okay. All right, thanks. I was just pinning it, although I would love to look at you the whole time. I should look at what I'm reading. Okay. Darkest settings or prolipsis for the online workshop. Click your profile picture, then click settings, click the video tab, enable adjust for low light. By default, the setting will be set to auto. However, you can select manual if you desire a broad spectrum of color, like kindergarten first and second, soft golden light illuminating Mike's crayon striped sweater and Crystal's Roy G. Biv clacker balls. Wide angle lens, the new school said they never captured a Black kid. Well, not one in the gifted class, all things considered. Third wasn't bad, and fourth was almost half as good, and fifth grade scholarship came with lint brushes, a light meter, a fresh 22-volume set of 1990 world books, unbelievable, and we can check out any of them? What? No, it's just cocoa butter. This is just how it's supposed to smell. Wait, I don't understand. Classmates click and shoot different in private school. Not even the photographer noticed. Good mama's good Niagara Falls starch on my shirt, both cuffs and the collar too. Picture day. Oh, the hallowed harbinger of unnecessarily exuberant postural critique. Thou anointer of vertebral bodies, cervical crowns, thoracic scepters, stout lumbars, rivaling the finest Assyrian battle rams, to say nothing of the sensual sacral in the cocksure cussicles. Behold, the plebeian uproar at platitudinous pubescent assessments. Verily, thou shalt meet a minimum height. Hot topic, food court. Lo, this paltry 50 inches shall forfeit the ride. Claire's waistlines, but tarry not, hormonal hourglass, bell curves, shift. Hark, a towering 5'59" at the 95th. By spring break, yearns to sit with the 75th, slim fast shakes, all 12 days of Christmas, plateauing still at the 85th, right when acne hits. You, the mighty arbitrator of oddly proportioned photo packages, 1 8x10 and or 4 5x7s and or 8 1.5 by 2.5, but you do love your grandparents, don't you? Add on 1 16x20, and what about your Sunday school teacher? Add on 6x9, and I'm sure your coach wants one, unless you've got, son, do you have a dad? 0 wallet size. Boys and girls, you're cutting into your recess time, not mine. Please focus just once, no makeups this year. You know the drill, tall kids in the back. A flitting glance at the other one. Across the stage, we decided not to stand side by side this day. We know what they'll say. The ones back there, all I see are 2 sets of eyes and teeth and that show-off Bonnie Blue, giggling the loudest, the whitest, the proudest, wearing another stupid bow. Up here looking like a damn Easter basket. That's right. I'll bet my 87 Randall Cunningham Pro Bowl rookie card she's got the War of Northern Aggression study guide memorized. Me, the other one, I, we, he, I grades beyond a 95. Bank our bonus points. Even if luck arrives, we must grind to grip the A's we most desire. Attention, attractiveness, acceptance, the D's loom the darkest. Another study hall, pushing the hardest, reaching the farthest for the largest F stop. It's apparent some apertures stay stuck for generations. Someday, maybe at least shift suffixes, be it darky or darky or darky or darky. Clearly, Black spelling matters. Like Niger, like Kunta, like welfare, like lavar después de lavarse, with La Milagrosa or Lucky Brown as muy importante, we vámonos by sundown, don't choke. Picture the home stretch of the test. Stand your ground, unwritten law. Our affirmative admission is automatic grounds for academic suspicion. Side note, bro, these people don't play with their property. So scrawling fire Ronald Reagan on the bleachers before practice today, like Alexander Darity, will sack both of us, snatch the melanin off our ass like a snapback in class. Don't talk, think, sedition, act. My guy, I'm not putting you on blast, just saying my people got held back a whole generation trying again to finish the double block. This right here will make sure you get to the back of my bus quick. Social psychology seminar and thermodynamics of public transportation physics lab. We only made it this far because they took an extra module, triangulating the same day grocery store, barbershop, church transition to catch the inevitable trick, questions in the advanced double consciousness seminar, midterm pass fail test. Click the background and filters tab, click studio effects in the lower right corner, choose your desired setting from the eyebrows, mustache and beard, lip color sections, select or deselect the apply to all future meetings checkbox, click close. Look at those turtlenecks. The rest of class thinks you and I is one and the same, but I know your mom cooks yellow rice, drives the only Astor van in the pickup lane. And I know your dad sort of works at Lowe's, except he has no uniform and like sometimes sits in the parking lot for 2-3 days in a row, to about bag lunch and hope. What I'm saying is persistence is a humble resistance, multi-generational studies and chronic resilience, catching rides across town to be early on time for the most people born here can't pass the citizen test, but Hermana, we will study group, which ends early on Fridays, so folks won't be late, trucking all the way back early for the standing room only masterclass. Toma su mano, and por favor, Dios, may the Brasiero checks arrive today. Yeah, my guy, it is hard to smile on command, but you know how proud they get when we present them with distinguished instances of intentional application of our classical education, AKA the triple threat. Unflappable grammar, buku logic, and rhetoric rooted in reparation. Demonstration? Okay. Real quick, just this one. There's only 3 kids left, then I'm on deck for my solo pick. There's this one time, I remember, I predict, sensing the approach of a drastic speed limit drop, I hollered, helped our scoutmaster avoid a behind the Kiwani sign, why are you hiding? It's already dark, cop. And I chuckled, but I stopped because he'll get his quota from a broken taillight stop of a F-150 with expired tags and a pack of migrants trying to find the pull-off for next stop in their seasonal harvest route. And if I'd studied the green book like Granddaddy said, then I could have told my scoutmaster, no, don't exit at Walhalla and pick a gas station anywhere that isn't Seneca. And then the scene never would have happened where the clerk tells my best friend the restroom is right behind us, but for his nigger friend, there's a tree, a nice tree out back. And I was scared, but mama already made me watch Mississippi Burning last year. So if this Boy Scout van becomes a freedom ride, so be it. And but no, sir, no, Mr. Sir, I'm sorry. We're sorry. Can we please leave? And I'll be a trooper and just hold it in. And once we pitch tents, we get to cook foil pack dinners. And if the coals can heat the kettle, then it's Swiss Miss with the mini marshmallows. And as 5 miles unraveled, I looked over and saw a mileage sign and realized if we hadn't guzzled all those Capri Suns, and if we'd all gone pee at the church like we said we'd done, then we could have made it. 2 more exits to the next town right over there. Fairplay, South Carolina. And what is adolescence, if not a medley of mistimed biological messages? See, me and my best friend's bladders were still so full, and the liquid started sloshing as we both switched back through the upcountry towards the North Carolina foothills. And I closed my eyes, but I had to open them right away because since Seneca, I need to see what might be seeing me, and I've got to pee so bad. And in the rear view, the scoutmaster is shaking his head, disappointed at me, and I plead, does not every bodily release constitute some small indecencies? Sir, I've really got to go pee, and I stay close to the van. Wash my condensing breath, find a star, anything to unseed the smashed up possum parts and fast food or refuse feet away from me. Reserved for the Department of Corrections highway crew, shackled to the morrow, day-glow orange jumpsuits, soon sunbird tattoos, and I'm looking over my shoulder. I'm not so sure I can sleep without dreaming of the nice tree, and I accidentally get pee on my leg, but I'm more angry because this is how you earn D's, and if 3 decades pass and I still never travel Highway 123 again, we'll see. My friend, Walhalla wins. I hit my shin on the wheel well, getting back in. As I winced from the sting, the other scouts joke how when I was out there, I disappeared, and one of them quips, yeah, all I see is, yes, you know I was ready, like we practiced. Tall kids in the back, angle your foreheads up, transcend the camera, radiate like sunflowers, yellow pine warblers, other eyes were just eyes and teeth. These settings allow for a better meeting webinar and remote work experience, as well as allow hosts and participants to add some flair to their video. Prolipsis, noun, the anticipation and answering possible objections in rhetorical speech, the representation of a thing as existing before it actually does or did, the intrusive recollection of stolen deja vu packaged and sold back to you. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Salim.
My pleasure.
That's wonderful. It's one of the most memorable poems in your entire collection, I think. I'm really glad you picked that one.
That was week 1. I had to throw it back.
Yeah. Thanks for trusting us with that piece. It's really powerful. The music in particular, and that piece is so important. So yeah, thank you, Salim. Our next reader is Susan Marie Swanson. It was a pleasure working alongside Susan Marie over the last year as she assembled her gorgeous book. She perpetually kept me on my toes in our one-on-one meetings with her rich and rewarding intellectual, existential, and sometimes even practical questions around what it means to be a stronger poet, and even, in fact, a good reader of poetry. Susan was able to deftly switch between asking the right questions and staying receptive in revision, and holding tight to what she knew to be right for her own work. As the year progressed, I felt honored to come to know her voice in many of its thoughtful, curiosity-inducing registers. Cohort member Jane Dickerson writes, Susan Marie Swanson's poetry has a humility that belies the beauty and precision of her language and thought, which one doesn't often find in poetry today. Poems fluently connect her Swedish ancestry, her lessons in Swedish, the birds of childhood and adulthood, the birds in a book Charlotte Bronte read as a child, and much more. In her poem Migrating Birds, she insightfully pairs a diagnosis of osteoporosis to the advantage of hollow bones for birds in flight. Especially enjoyable is her habit of writing a poem about writing a poem she can't find the words for, letting the reader engage in the process until the non-poem becomes a poem. What a success. Please welcome Susan Marie Swanson.
Thanks so much. I'm going to jump right in with a poem that I hope will partly at least describe my sense of good luck and gratitude to Gretchen Marquette and to this, my peer group of remarkable poets, and the Loft itself for the poetry apprenticeship. The poem is called More Starlings, and for writers in the group or anyone who's tried to write something has had this experience, I think, where you think that you maybe need to know more or do more or be more or research more before you can actually go write the thing. And so it's about that experience. And there's a little bit of Swedish in it. It's a snippet of a poem by the Swedish poet Tomas Tranströmer, and the translation immediately follows the little Swedish phrase. So it's in the body of the poem. More starlings. Everything I could write about wants me to know more before I write it down, to be done before I try, to know how before I do, to say nothing about starlings until I know Mozart's starling, Tranströmer's starlings, som håller gryningen i check, that keep the dawn in check. The starlings in my neighborhood, and those starlings in the announcement of the Nobel Prize in Physics 2021, where patterns arise in a murmuration of thousands of starlings. No more starling poems till then. This next poem is called Befolkning, the number of people living in a particular place. Befolkning is the Swedish word for population. And there are two characters in this poem. One is a version of me learning Swedish and joining a new church. The other character is my grandfather as a child growing up in a Swedish-speaking household in Nebraska. Befolkning, the number of people living in a particular place. Befolkning is population, an ordinary word in the language my grandfather spoke in a world where every household had a view of the stars. What if I lived in a language spoken by fewer people, read by, thought? It's not that I know Swedish, it's that I'm trying to do something about not knowing it. Last winter, I joined a church like the church of my childhood, where there are readings every Sunday from the lectionary. These stories and poems I've known my whole life have been shared in more than 1,000 languages. Last Sunday, the lectionary stories were about visitors. God found Abraham and Sarah in their tent shaded by oaks. Jesus visited Mary and Martha in their village at Martha's house. Sarah and Martha did all of the housework. It says so right there in the Bible. I mean, the old stories are about the doing and the not doing of ordinary housework, one told in biblical Hebrew, the other in Greek, about people who spoke ancient dialects of their own. As a boy, my grandfather heard these same stories about chores, read from a Swedish Bible printed here in the United States. A day in Nebraska, 1895. The wings of sandhill cranes hold the birds up as they glide in over the Platte River. The songs of meadowlarks fly out of their yellow throats. And I used to think that I was not born into a story. Well, I don't exactly tell stories in my poems. Gretchen and I have been figuring out together that I tell about stories. One of the stories that I tell about in my work is my mother's story, and about my story of being the daughter of someone who was orphaned, including having lost her mother as a toddler. This poem, Pillowcases, is partly about that. And it goes by kind of quickly, so you might appreciate knowing there are quick little references to some stories from Denmark and Sweden. There's a reference quickly to the little match girl, one to Pippi Longstocking, one to the Billy Goat's Gruff, one to the Nightingale by Hans Christian Andersen. Pillowcases. Once upon a time, I was a child who read stories translated from languages my great-grandparents spoke. where a hungry girl lost her shoes and lit matches against the cold, and the laughing girl scrambled back and forth across the roof of her very own house. Every night, I put my head down on a pillow, tugged and shaken into a pillowcase my mother laundered on a Monday and ironed on a Tuesday. She was motherless every day, like the girls in my books. She was sad, my mother, but because she was humming a happy tune, no one saw, no one else. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars. The goats tricked the monster under the bridge. The nightingale sang a song so beautiful it deceived death. I read these stories alone in my bed. I slept and woke and slept until I was no longer a child. I had a mother the whole time. This is the newest poem in the group of all my poems, I guess, and it's called Winters. And I thought it might be more fun for you to hear it if you knew that it begins with a little tiny scene that's for about 40 years ago when I take a fall on the ice and I have a little baby with me, and then it moves to the present. And then it moves back to my own childhood and back to the present again. And it's sort of the reason the poem exists is to make that movement. Winters. Watching the sun set into winter branches, I took a hard fall onto the icy pavement. My baby, strapped to my chest, looked up at me with wide eyes. 40 years later, everything those chokecherry trees knew is still going into cherries. And the crunch of ice, the snowplows, flashing lights, those keep coming back. But winter evenings, my mother sat at the piano playing songs from the big red book. Those have turned into just this string of words. The Renoir print I picked out in a museum shop when I was 9, the clerk rolled it up in a twangy rubber band. In the same sentence where I explain that my mother saw to it the picture got a beautiful frame, I'm also saying that the picture is gone too. Here's the last one. It's called Living on a Hill in the City of St. Paul. I want to thank all of you, everyone here tonight, for being here to support all of us. And I want to thank Andrea, who's missing, and Nissa and Jane and Gabby and Lisa and Celine and Don for being such wonderful companions over the year. And of course, Gretchen Marquette over the apprenticeship year. Living on a Hill in the City of St. Paul. Oh, wait, one more thing. It mentions, many of you know that Emily Dickinson poem where she is riding in a carriage and the horses' heads are facing eternity. That's in here. We read fairy tales and imagine that we are the princess or the king, though really we are the boy digging turnips or a dog chasing goats at dusk in the margins of the story. Think about the smooth stones in the real creek that used to flow near here, now channeled underground. We could be wood lilies, clouds illuminated like magic lanterns. Oh, oxygen, where have you been? Whose door is this? And why am I knocking so hard? Here's a molecule of Emily Dickinson's first breath, and one her hands displaced when she reached for the penknife that sharpened her pencil. Maybe I won't write poems anymore. I'll just sit here knowing that when Dickinson was born, the prairie on this hill was unplowed, the forest down by the river uncut, the moon and stars everywhere undimmed. The boy puts down his bag of turnips and washes his hands in the creek. The dog nuzzles the boy's face. It is not strange to them, the unhurried sound of the horses with their heads toward eternity, stopping to drink. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Susan Marie. I said it in the chat bar as well, but just how consistent and strong your voice is throughout all those poems. And just so everyone knows, it's like that throughout the entire collection. So I can't wait for it to be something people can hold in their hands and share and talk about. And I hope the people who find your book are as careful and generous a reader as you are, Susan Marie. Thanks so much for sharing your work. Our next poet tonight is Don Farrell. Don is a poet of great humility, tenderness, vulnerability, and sharp original imagination. Throughout the year, Don wrote poems across the full spectrum of human experience, all with the thread of the natural world running through them. Rather than merely a figurative device, the world around him, its birds, its weather patterns, its hues and shades, its surprises and its violence, are treated as a presence, a character in the book, and treated with great reverence. The epigraph of his collection is taken from John Ashbery and reads, "Remain mysterious, rather than be pure, accept yourself as numerous." It is perhaps the most perfect epigraph I've seen on a book. Fellow cohort member Gabby Bogle writes, Don's rich, colorful imagery can carry the reader from a meditation on spring flowers to the anguish of loss, trauma, recovery, within a few lines, moving from, quote, "your pollens, your nectar, your bliss," to "my hyenas hunted me," within 2 stanzas. Farrell's poetry offers the beauty of changing Midwestern seasons and the wonder of a man watching himself grow. Please join me in welcoming Don Farrell.
Thanks, Gretchen. Here we go. Well, actually, thanks Saint Gretchen for putting up with me for the last year and helping me be a little bit more appropriate than I normally am. You've been a very positive influence. Along with the cohort, you guys know who you are. And I appreciate those of you that are coming to listen to anybody tonight, but especially those of you that are coming to hear me read and still seeking lower companionship. I appreciate that. And you might want to take a look at that. I'm just going to kind of burn through these as best I can, and it won't take too long. They're all pretty short, and I'll try to take my time with them. First one is transition. The fluttering chirps of robins when earth is still frozen and the red poles remain, winter receding into steams of maple sugars and wood fire haze, lingers in scattered piles of snow like frozen soldiers sinking into mud. We can scream into this moment as it passes, asking us to shut up and listen. Become invisible inside this second. Set everything aside, everything we've been taught, everything we believe. Drain all our old blood into the grass, die with winter. Breathe in the air warmed by the sun on our face. Vow to never return to our old ways. How deep is gravity? I barely have to touch my life and it squirts a little pee on the floor. Just the tail of a toad's worth, but wet nonetheless. What instinct is it that pisses from a nerve, tickled by a stress, only imagined in a mind, as much wild turnip flower as seal pup, and as much crude oil as bat liver. We know the miner was braver than the minerals he dug, but found himself there talking to the rock deep within. Will I ever be that one where the only light is mine? The only mine is light, no matter how dark I go. Early sobriety. Can you recall the barren years within every minute without booze, as the heat of it held your child in interrogation, red-faced, trying not to get caught and knowing they are only asking, how's it going? How do you say in German, I'm afraid, the air is trying to suffocate me, the sun is broken, water has no taste, a stale taste, my skin is invisible and buzzes like a mosquito in the dark. When will my eyes see outward? How do cactus mate? Where do I put my hands? My face. Big fat chin meat slung ear to ear, bristled, blonde and grayed, a swollen apron for sun-red flesh. My father's eyes, a hair in blue-gray, fierce as gun wounds in his legs, whiskey on his breath, a finger missing from the plow, a horse thief smile, his bed in grandma's porch. Where we fold for the night. What would come of me if I could walk past flowers faster than a goat can graze them? Would I not pause to touch you either? Not notice or respond to where your hair begins, behind your ear, along your neck, to the pulsing within your petals in your luxurious kiss, to colors bright as bird songs, soft as whale songs, brash as a donkey's bray, to the milky center of our eclipse, to butterflies that quiver feather-thin wings and balance the breeze, to our eyelashes nestling briefly, smearing beyond where our temples tremble together. What on earth are you doing? Older than grass, she hears wing beats of butterflies clinging to milkweed. She feels the warmth of mice nursing. She knows every rusting implement forgotten and overgrown, every piece of glass and mossy rock. She's seen moonlight glow from under the snow and breathed that damp, frozen darkness deep into her lungs, like shadows of the dead inhaled through history. I've watched her look at you in the sun. She pauses at your listening, your gazing to the grasses, for the prisms in your sweat. She knows everything there is to know about you, and still she is taken with your aroma, taken with your stunning heartbeat. You are accompanied with the quietest places on the prairie. Your essence mingles only in the thin shadows between feathers, in the film between water and reflection, in the last few breaths of a life, and the sound of a seed's first root. You seem to be here to allow breezes to blow the curtains in and out of your windows. You are so young for this old place, young as every day that comes and heats up and keeps coming until evening and twilight, deep night. You rest between breaths like cattle beneath a tree, staring out where you will one day join her. For now, though, you are tempting as sunlight braided through lace, your features so pleasant, your awareness beyond honey, rum, even water. 2019. Sun blaring, bouncing off the snow, slapping the pupils from my eyes, slow as a mole rat, sniffing my way forward, dogs on heel as if dribbling 3 basketballs, banging into my knees, stepping into my stride, begging to be released like balloons in a typhoon. Break, they flee with the spirited glee of the last day of school, forever 8 in human years. How do they see into this brilliant white winter? And what happened to me that I'm no longer reckless, full of speed? walking one step at a time on an icy dirt road, wondering, is it worth the rest of my life to shoot the president? Stunning. Spring was here, but he left. Maybe he's changing clothes again after crapping his dress. So maddening. Spring, this loquacious young man who loves dressing up, heels and hair, keeps slipping on the ice into mud, starting over. So hard to understand. Wear jeans and duck boots, let's go, but no, a whole new cleanup and gown. A sundress would be nice without the big yellow overcoat and galoshes. It'll be May before he gets it all together, but when he does, what a sight. So glorious, so precocious, so dear. He is a parade, a promenade, a perfect beauty, flowered, feathered, and singing, simply stunning. Climate karma. Wind throws around a red tail clinging to the wire, wrestles the trees free of their leaves. When rain fires its cannons, everything ducks down. Even barns seem to tuck in their shoulders and arch their backs like horses with nowhere to hide. The sun, still sharing a slice of the sky, screams every color at Earth until taken over by the diesel gray darkness plowing down the horizon. The wet electricity smells like piles of tires, emanates with every blaring flash. The fantastic jolts slap the jellowed flesh of the atmosphere, the trembling trampoline of Earth. We watched it coming, stayed in our cars and pulled over, praying it would blow over, that our part would be too small to measure and forgiven. Bucha, as in the town of Bucha. An old bear ambled upon a killdeer nest, not fooled by bird dramatics, sat, picked one chick at a time to chew and swallow, as if at a table with friends, snacking on a bowl of jelly beans, squeaking pink and chewy jelly beans. Wild man fantasies. Maybe if I searched for pheasant eggs, I'd find God in swirled grass and feathers. If I held my breath and became invisible, maybe she'd return and sit with me, a dear bird, an angel brooding near my ear as I lay breathless. Maybe if I massaged your feet before bed, we could hold hands in lawn chairs all evening, listening sometimes with our eyes closed for the farthest robin. Like us, some feathers propel her slowly down, lighter even than maple seeds. Their new life too, just beginning, a quieter, contemplative quivering gently into earth. What if they ask these questions in hospitals? How soft are the sands your waves roll upon? When the sky is this clear, can you face the sun? Do ducks dabble in your pond? Do you wear shoes all summer? Do you know what percentage of your DNA came from the African cradle of civilization? Have you been held up to the light? Could you see through yourself? Have you fallen apart yet? Have you brought all your leaves into one pile and jumped in? Did you invite anyone? Have you found flicker feathers in the grass? Are the sparkles riding ripples on your pond precious? And for the last one, the title is the same as the first line. Pond slurry, just warm enough to breathe, is the air on every little hair. Dear as thawed frogs finally singing. With robins, geese, redwings, swans, all their vibrations bouncing off barns and houses to the stars and Mars and Mercury, down railroad tracks, over the tops of our tongues and into our arteries, vibrating all the way through Earth and back up the legs and vibrating all the way through Earth and up the legs of elephants and antelope and back between tectonic plates to dinner plates, into our foundations, around nails and walls, across the surface of water to the eggs of ducks and dragonflies. Reverberating hymns of free creatures, coming cold at first, like the aroma of unfolding newspapers, settling in like the sweet smell of worms after rain, and now like the melted butter and jelly on your toast. So rich we hardly notice how marvelous, how significant ordinary is. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Don. Such a beautiful, beautiful selection. I should tease you a little bit though, and let everyone know that, everyone sent me their block of marble, so to speak, that all the work that they had done, and we could start forming a manuscript out of it. And I think Don sent me like 180 pages or something. And between the two of us, we got it down to like 90 pages, but there was just so much good stuff there. It was really hard to cut it down beyond that. So yeah, thank you, Don. You have such a great reading voice. Isn't it fantastic how many different voices we've already heard tonight? It's like, Lisa described the group as a motley crew, and it truly is. Just so many different contributions. We still have 3 readers left. Our next reader is Nissa Valdez. Nissa is a poet of great courage and stamina, someone who allows her gut and heart to guide her toward content that has been waiting just for her. Sometimes this content leads her toward formal work, such as the Abecedarian. Sometimes she's called toward the natural world, particularly the world of botany and water. At other times, she takes on the risks of documenting the past in all its joy, suffering, and complexity. I admired certain unique aspects of Nissa's process. A repeating pattern, such as an unfamiliar word surfacing multiple times in a few days, or the appearance of the same wild plant on multiple walks, would lead her to research details and etymologies that often ended up finding homes in her work. She is a grounded poet that is truly of the world around her. Lisa Friedman writes, reading Nissa Valdez's work, of water. Reading Nissa's work is like moving through a slipstream, being propelled by language that holds you and then pushes you on. There is no hope of stasis. Her collection is an exploration of the highways, waterways, and throughways that carry ancestors across oceans, deserts, states, and continents. It is about the power of water to give life, hold it, and even take it away. In her poem, Minerals, the speaker writes of being on bed rest while pregnant with her twin sons, 2 placentas laid like lily pads, tethered by umbilical cords connecting them to me, quote unquote. Her collection is also about power, inheritance, and generational trauma. She pleads in Minerals, quote, I counted each minute toward fetal milestones, tried not to pass the poison of trauma through the cord. In writing this collection, she has succeeded. Please join me in welcoming Nissa Valdez.
Thank you, Gretchen. Thanks for the introduction and for the year that you've shined your light on all of us, but your help has been so wonderful and has really allowed me to pull out things that I didn't know were waiting for me there. So I'd also like to thank my husband, my devoted love, who has really picked up a lot of extra work the last year and allowed me some space to write. And my 2 sons, who I adore, and my 3 parents, 2 of them are here tonight, and I'm so happy they're here. So this first poem is called The Arrow. The Arrow, 1953 to 2018. 10 years it sat empty after my Tia died. Adobe cracking, roof in tatters, ragged curtains. The motel she built with her husband. Its long row of rooms, deserted and lonely, like a ghost waiting for other ghosts, a skeleton, soul extracted. They traveled to Mexico to gather tiles made by skilled hands, aqua green, goldenrod, cobalt blue, ruby red. Sun beat down on hot days in July, spread on the floor, I'd lose myself in the cool tile, laid thick on walls and floors. What seemed plain would reveal magic, It was the first motel in town, built on the main drag running along the Rio Grande. 10 steps away from the row of rooms, the house they built to raise their family. Windows looking out on 2 roads, one to Santa Fe, the other to Chimayo. Her sister lived just down that road in a little pink adobe. My tias arrived there together in their early 20s, meandered downstream from southern Colorado beside the Rio Grande and blazing cottonwood, one with her baby boy, the only treasure from a forced marriage to an older man who beat love into her. They went in search of new lives in a new valley carved from the same water. As little girls, they'd be sent out to pick raspberries from long producing canes. Thorny barbs caught their tender skin. They'd eat as many as they could. Delicious pink bits of sweetness, tart bursts of summer. I watched candy-colored lowriders cruise past. Somewhere between girl and woman, my devotions yet untethered, budding and curiously piqued. These roving love letters ignited sparks in me, storytelling on the stage of asphalt. Mobile retablos stopped in the lot across the street for exposition, bouncing, lifting, and hopping, before rolling low and slow into the night. Then one day, the motel was a dusty pile of broken tile and debris. All those lives, all that hospitality settled to the earth. A clear view of the Rio Grande. The only thing left standing was the neon sign. A brown-skinned man shooting an arrow over and over into forever. The next 3 poems are from a crown of sonnets that I wrote. A sonnet is a 14-line poem, and many traditional sonnets have rhyming lines. Mine don't rhyme, but the crown is a sequence of sonnets where the first line of each sonnet is carried over from the last line of the previous sonnet, and the first line of the first sonnet is repeated as the last line of the final sonnet. So these 3 are taken out of order. You might notice a couple lines in between. Antimatter. For every action in nature, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Newton's 3rd law of motion. Before I'm level with the earth and overgrown with buffalo grass, I'm trying to understand the thin threads of our cosmic web. In the beginning, matter and antimatter were equal. Proton to antiproton, neutrino to antineutrino, and so on and on. We sprang from the oscillation between, inequality giving rise to us. Maybe that's what balance is, a fluctuation of forces floating between equalities in our photon bath. Your closeness to me in the night, breathing deep in sleep, each exhale pronounced like a proclamation of relief. Possibility of the impossible, this proximity we share. I always tell you it's not luck. You say our entanglement is a highly conditioned probability. Our involvement in the equation, positive and negative charged. Polarity we sway around. The romance of wild roses blooming pink and fragrant, fuzzy bumblebee with electric charges, her soft hairs bending with attraction to the dusty golden pollen held in waxy petals. The way static pushes and pulls, a magnetic dance moving around what home feels like, is the story of life. That's for my husband, who is a physicist. This one is called Galleons. Galleons. Before the galleons carried my grandfathers across from Spain, spread missions from Mexico north, my grandmothers, their native soil underfoot, warmed by original sunshine, with hair glistening, in moonbeams and constellations, passing their stories through song. I wonder what they called the hot blue sparkle of the seven divine sisters. Survival's spoken map of wisdom, then just a shred remained. My blood truth tells what my family worked so hard to cover up. Languages lost, true origins buried with broken shards of pots baked in first fires. Over time, lies sown from shame and teaching of self-hatred, my inheritance. Our stories erased to hide what the missionaries wanted us to forget. We are both colonizer and colonized, native and missionary. His story made to turn on self. But when I stare into the luminous sky, my heart comes to the fore, exposed and bare. I am held and connected. What is the significance of a story if it isn't true at all? And this last one is for my dad, called Mother Tongue. My father braids prayers into each moment, mostly to God or the Queen of Heaven. By age 3, he was both our father and mother, navigating daughters with emotional waters not flowing in him. The language of my heart, foreign. Our static-filled connection bolstered by rituals of belonging, matching chestnut eyes tethered to the soul. A puzzle of a person, he taught me to speak and think in curious sequences, strong convictions anchored to every question. He was teaching French at an all-girls school when I was born. Before that, he translated radio waves from Russian while stationed in Turkey. He learned Catholicism as a teenager, baptized at 19 while in the Air Force, into the religion that formed my grandfather, whose Spanish-speaking parents and grandparents learned brutality taught by missionaries. My grandfather ran bleeding from it, leaving home, family, mother tongue, and name behind. He never taught his children the words he grew up speaking or introduced them to his mother or sister. He didn't even tell them the name he was born with. Now my dad preaches in Spanish, like his grandfathers did before the galleons carried them across from Spain. That's it. Thank you all for being here and giving me an ear or two.
Thank you so much, Nissa. I feel like, we've read your poems aloud when we've been workshopping them together, but it's just so powerful to hear them read all in succession. And I feel like they're even more powerful when read aloud than they are on the page, which is saying something. So thank you for doing that. You're a beautiful reader. So yeah. Our next reader tonight is Jane Dickerson. It was such a rewarding experience spending time with Jane over the course of the last year. I was humbled and impressed by how she spent much effort over the years, making a durable and honored home for poetry in her life. Jane's poems about her beloved daughter, birds, urban natural spaces, her old friends, and more are intricate and thoughtful. Reading her work, I'm reminded of William Carlos Williams' saying that poems are small machines made of words. Jane's poems are like tiny clocks, measuring and counting the experiences of her life, intricately constructed objects that nevertheless run smoothly, a pleasure to read. Lisa Friedman says of Jane, she is a poet with a distinctive voice that is witty, sly, and direct, but always softened by tenderness and empathy. In her opening poem, she writes of an Easterner who thought he saw an old world warbler. Impossible, says the speaker dismissively, but who goes on almost apologetically to say, quote, I've done that so many times. Nature is Dickerson's sustenance. Her poems are about recognizing and naming the beauty that surrounds her. Please welcome Jane Dickerson.
Hi, it's nice to be here tonight. And I'm so grateful that you're all here, especially my friends from way back, I think a long time ago. Actually, there's a woman here, you might see her, Monica Paroli. She was my foreign exchange student sister when I was in high school. And she lives in Mendoza, Argentina. And she is my dear friend. My sisters are here as well, and a nephew and a niece and other people. And it's just such a wonderful thing. Anyway, and I want to thank Gretchen, of course. And I think Susan Marie said it best in the very beginning with all of her shout outs to people. It's been a fantastic year. I was exhausted. I still am a little, but anyway. And I guess I better remember my husband who made it all very possible. He's a wonderful person and he supported me all the time. So, and has, and encouraged me. I'll begin with the poem that Lisa Marie mentioned, ironically. So anyway, Reverie at the Other Como. I'm glad to find my bench deserted, the park too, for that matter, because it's a weekday and cloudy and chill enough to stay the walkers, though not the lovers who just strolled by. The birds are scarce, not one wing in the trees or on the lake, in this city where a century ago someone thought to dig a lake and name it for the one in Italy I doubt I'll see. Here, under an awkwardly leaning pine, my hope of finding any bird diminished, equably decide it's all right. Become philosophical, thankful for that which lies behind. The other day, an Easterner wrote about a bird, to him mysterious, finally deciding it was an old world warbler. Impossible. Did he see something wished for? I've done that so many times. My next poem is called West Virginia, Pop Williams. It's a pantoum, which is a lovely form, and Rita Moe is a mistress of this form. I've read several of her poems, and they're just beautiful. West Virginia, Pop Williams. Too young to play ball in my grandmother's lot, I perched on Pop's knee for the after-supper games. He damped his shirt with the tang of old cigarettes. Those August evenings, I sat content on his ample knee. He was squat and square, spark plug-like and kingly, his odor hovering in the rose humidity of the open field. My siblings' memories have fogged, no registry of him. They had each other, but he was royalty to me. Sometimes he played horseshoes with the other men by the woods and river. What do the siblings remember if none of this? Did our grandfather play ringers with the men? They cannot say. Like Pop, the other men were laborers who threw the relics of their farm days near the falling banks of the Monongahela River. My grandfather may have been another sort, tie tucked into his shirt. The games are clear, but the men Pop horsed around with indistinct. That fertile field lies inert beneath lifeless asphalt, old horses, shoes, and all. The cries of bases stolen, ringers thrown, have died away. My mother would know about her father, but she is buried too. All are gone, gone to where I cannot say, but flown. Summer nights, shouting, laughter, timelessness, when Pop Williams was alive and bumped me on his knee. No one else can remember what I can smell and see. Twilight, haze, mixing dreamily with cigarettes and sweat. The next two poems involve my daughter, Claire. I'll tell you more about her after I read this one. It's called Handbook on Grief. I archived the link to the book. I'll need it to tell me what to do and when I break down and how to recover. I'm supposed to die before her, my 40-year-old daughter, who hopes to join the dogs and other pets in heaven, the place she signs above her head when she's able to raise her arms that high. Her breasts were first to go, and now her heart is failing. She's taken the loss of male attention like someone with her point of view. The morning after the double surgery, she smiled for the camera in my phone, left hand signing, I love you for friends and family. She won't let me delete them. I don't want to remember, but obey. I'm happy to say that since I wrote that poem last spring, or earlier in the spring, my daughter's heart failure has improved with wonderful medications and great care. And also she's heading on 5 years of life after having had breast cancer 5 years ago. So it's really quite remarkable. She was given a 50% chance of living this long. So we're quite pleased over here in my world. The next poem is called A Mold of Lady's Paw. The crude clay print of the dog's forepaw, too rough for paint or polish, was the vet's idea of solace before they burned her. We could have had her ashes too, for a price we couldn't conscience. And when, not if, Claire decided to dig them up, how could we have denied her? The coarse plaque was strange, unlike handprints made in grade school by the sentient. Claire carried the rough slab in her gym bag for months, till she stowed it in a drawer. A shrug when I wondered why. Phoenix birds for Ken Kesey on the death of his son, Jed, in 1984. The hardest part, he wrote his gang of friends who couldn't make the funeral, was when they'd had to sign the papers to let the doctor harvest the boy's organs before his life had ended. The boy whose brain had been dead for days after the wrestling bus had floated off a cliff. Let me repeat that. Before the wrestling team bus had floated off a cliff. The boy whose skull his father had packed with fresh snow in plastic bags in the hospital to slow the swelling. The boy who seemed to show signs of life just minutes before he flatlined. The boy whose box they'd hand built from pine with a lining the women stapled in, a Tibetan brocade with gilded phoenix birds, and a satin pillow on which to rest his head. Made from the down of a swan, one of them had mistaken for a snow goose and had buried quickly, but not before the plucking. The boy whose kidneys, the day he died, saved 2 young somebodies. In all, 12 parts of him passed on, including his perfect corneas. A boy whose father wrote about the prayers they'd said, the songs they'd sung, and who ended his letter to his friends, and the red-winged blackbirds sing in the budding green gage plum tree, by way of showing how he was weathering his grief. And before I close, I just wanted to say hi to some friends who are here from out of state. Walter, Larry, Nancy, I know I'm missing someone. It's just really great. people I met in college and since then. So, and the rest of you know who you are. And yeah, thanks, Pete. Spring song. It's coming, I promise it is. Yesterday morning's wind brought rain, then storied clouds against a blue, blue sky. Clouds like castles that took my breath, brighter clouds mushrooming, taking it again. Afternoon, behind the budding trees, dark sky lowered, washed with purple bruises, followed by a charging wind that clawed across the screen, pelting lime green grass with perlite hail. Whipped clean, laundered, blued, sent tripping eastward over the garages, whistling that familiar of Midwestern spring. Whistling not where are you going, but where? Where have you been? Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jane. That was beautiful. That Phoenix Birds poem, there are so many images in that poem that have stuck with me ever since the first time I read it. And when we were talking about what the book might be called, that was something we'd gone back to, that this idea of these Phoenix birds felt really important. So much of Jane's book is about loss, but also about, life returning, whether it's seasons or people coming back in the form of memories. And so thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Our last reader tonight, certainly not least, is Gabby Vogel. Gabby Vogel's manuscript, Temporary Quarters, seems at first to be about a girl from a complicated, beloved military family whose life is disrupted by their constant moving. Once a reader settles in, however, they see a girl who is learning to call the whole world home, a girl who is growing into a woman who will champion migration as a human right, and who does not begrudge the person a safe space who, unbeknownst to her, lived in her home while she was away one winter. The book doesn't travel as a direct chronological narrative, but instead moves us over, around, back and through multiple states, counties, and timelines, including the one she is living in today with her beloved spouse, grandchildren, and her beautiful cats. National events in Gabby's book are rendered carefully as both public and private experiences. Jane Dickerson writes of Gabby's work, a quote from Cicero introduces Gabby Vogel's fine debut book, Temporary Quarters. Quote, "No cure for exile except to love every city as you would your own." The middle child in an Air Force family, Vogel moved from base to base, state to state, and with her siblings from school to school, making temporary friends every few years. Having led a nomadic life, she feels affinity with new immigrants and the unhoused. When her father is on alert during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, her innocent question, "Can nuclear bombs fly faster than Dad?" causes her mother to spill her coffee. In 1970, she was enrolled in a civilian high school where, quote, "kids wore black armbands for Kent State, but my parents never discussed that." The alyssum growing on Alcatraz echoes in another poem where, quote, "a volunteer writes letters to an asylum seeker." Vogel loves the world, its cities, flaws, and all. Please welcome Gabby Vogel.
Oh, thank you very much. This has been a very wonderful year for me, developing my writing skills. And I would like to thank the Loft Center for the opportunity. I especially would like to thank Gretchen for your gentle but wise guidance in poems and finding things that I never knew I had within me to share. So that was great. And my poetry peers in the apprenticeship for helping me to learn how to share those things and to write about them more clearly. And also I had my husband, who is not a poet or a poetry reader, but was willing to give me the space, or let me have the space to do my thing, and my sons, who actually did some occasional reading for me. And so, and also thank you all for coming tonight and supporting us. My father was, as Gretchen mentioned, my father was a career Air Force officer, and we moved a lot and spent a lot of time in temporary quarters, which is the name of my book. There are many types of temporary quarters in life, and that's the theme of my book. I've got 7 poems and various times and spaces. I'll be skipping timelines. This is the opening poem of my book, probably the only one that doesn't have a date on it. But I once packed a footlocker with paper dolls hiding flat against the bottom. They were princesses and fairies with their glossy mink stoles and fairy wing cutouts. But they understood, I'm sure, the need to save space for the practical bulk of real life. Sweaters, pajamas, shoes, a blanket. There was just enough space for the Valentine that I meant to send to a friend, maybe for next year. I packed pictures and leftover candy from a recent parade. I packed a smoky quartz rock shaped like the Milky Way, just to pretend that I would still see that starry cloud at our next house. I packed a baseball that I had stolen from a troublesome neighborhood kid into a zippered pocket, hoping to hide the evidence and also hoping to forget that it was there. I did not pack the ugly plaid dress that I wore for Thanksgiving. It hung abandoned in an empty closet in a house that we were leaving. I pressed it flat against the darkest wall and turned off the light. Regarding the next poem, October 26, 1962 was the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Families were glued to TVs and radios. Some families were on military bases within the strike zone, preparing to evacuate if necessary or possible. On an air base 1,300 miles from Cuba, October 26, 1962. Midnight, Dad in his flight suit. I hear its nylon sleeves shishing, fast, heavy footsteps, fast, hushed words in the hallway, grown-up words, runways rumbling louder than usual. Second grade on an Air Force base, we have timed subtraction tests, recess, reading, until I walk home. Suitcases are open on the couch where Mom can see the TV and pack. Eyes wild and wide like a cartoon, jabbering. We'll be okay. She's usually barefoot. This afternoon, her shoes tap up and down the narrow hallway as she grabs clothes. Thinks we're going to Chicago, friends, maybe Colorado, cousins, not Florida, grandparents. Oh my God. One toy for each of us. You kids can decide. Paper dolls fit best, adding and subtracting to make everything fit in the bags. We have a red Volkswagen Beetle. Can nuclear bombs fly faster than Dad? Mom spills her coffee and it drips off the end table. TV on and on. Mushroom clouds on the screen, serious grown-ups talking. Baby sister on the floor, brother plays with army men. When? Mom waits for instructions. She finds another cup of coffee, and the lit end of her cigarette blazes brighter than her face because the sun has gone down. I don't remember dinner, but there were always fish sticks. Mom let us sleep together in the living room at night, the baby and I on a pile of blankets on the floor. Then I went back to school. Mom put the suitcases away and turned off the TV, closed her eyes for a while. Dad came home. My family visited Alcatraz in 2021. Alcatraz has been home to the military, to felons, to occupying Native Americans, and now to nature. What blooms on Alcatraz? Alcatraz has flowers. Succulents and trailing ice plant bust through the remains of Civil War barracks and officers' housing. But not even sweet Alyssum volunteers have cracked cell block D of the main prison that forced violent lives into dormancy. On a windy rock surrounded by frigid water, mottled prisoners planted Pride of Madeira, with her purple blooming fists rising waist high beside the pathways. Added poppies and roses to soften brutal edges, while the Birdman, Eddie, Al, Tommy the Hammer, Jake, Machine Gun, and number 110 withered in the cement holes on top of the rock. The flowers on Alcatraz dawdled 40 dry summers after the prison closed, until gardeners returned and lined them up again. Biologists count the herons now waiting below crumbled family apartments. They celebrate new chicks with red marker on whiteboard, as if head counts still mattered. Excuse me. As I said, most of my poems have a date and location. This dream sequence is called The Cafe of the Glorious Past. The Cafe of the Glorious Past opens in my dreams. Its ragged door sticks, but I float above the rubber welcome mat because this is a dream. The owner's mother is frying eggs. He will be the last owner. When I order coffee, my mother brings it. She wears a tiara. This is the glorious past. My old neighbor sits down at the other end of the counter and asks for a banana. He gets bacon, still shining in its own hot oil. The glorious past only serves what's dead and cooked. Plastic sunflowers, too tall for their flimsy vase, lean against the cash register. From a corner table, the resident storyteller recites Milton. He's busking for train fare home, but I have no money and my neighbor is an unbeliever. My neighbor died 3 years ago. No one wants the eggs, so the owner wraps them in a faded flag, places them in the cooler for later. I have never seen later in a dream, and I will not see it here. Waving a flaming frying pan, the owner's mother runs from the kitchen. She screams at all of us that it is closing time, as the walls, the coffee, and even the sunflowers explode with the best blazing colors in this dream. My neighbor and I lock arms. I remember us floating through the door, but I still woke up alone at dawn. Maybe someone carried someone. It was the glorious past. After spending my childhood moving all over the place, I volunteer with asylum seekers now. A volunteer writes letters to asylum seekers in detention. Phoenix, 2018. Dear Valeria, I hear you are young and alone. I hear that it has been 17 months on appeal. My best guess for a card to cheer your cell has a photo of a sunflower field. Dear Maria from Venezuela, waiting to learn about your daughter's status. I'm sending some proverbs about faith, a poem about hope, blind toss-outs to pierce the isolation. We Americans love faith and hope. Dear Sylvia, dear Leticia, I see hummingbirds from my window, a plague on the news. Maybe you like crossword puzzles, just one extra page in your envelope. Estimada Maricela, I could listen if you could write, but we both know being heard is a luxury, belonging only to people who own the bed where they dream. That much I've learned from the silence. This is the one that Gretchen referenced about the squatters that borrowed our home for the winter. And during the winter of 2022, our summer home near Lake Minnetonka was home to some very tidy squatters. The literary journal Storm Cellar will publish this poem in their spring 2023 issue. Dr. Dolittle and the Winter Visitors, Minneapolis 2022. A burned out bathroom bulb and a Dr. Dolittle book are the deepest cracks from your visits on those snowy nights. It's been a house full of maybes since we found evidence of your presence. A summer place left empty during frozen winter. Friends checked during the daylight, our guessing game at first. The crayon box could already have been open, but how do faucets drip when the water's turned off? Costly china dolls still gaze through a cabinet door, but our children's dusty books were rifled. You were tidy, even made the bed, but didn't fussy fold towels like my mother. The police said squatters and addicts are always messy. Thought it was family, some stealthy son or sister or friend that broke through the patio lock. A mother and her boyfriend in the town had murdered their 6-year-old that week. The officers needed some easy answers. None arrived through their earbuds that day. But our family doesn't steal garbage bags, and I've taught them how to fold towels. And this last one is about a special night, the night before my dad officially retired from the Air Force. He and I left the base and took a spur of the moment trip to New York City. It's called Honorable Discharge, April 1970. Rain feels the same anywhere. In the wet trails on the bus window, headlights looked brighter than overseas. My father sat quietly in the darkness in his aisle seat. We shared energy, restlessness, left family oozing fatigue and disapproval back on the airbase. The top of the Empire State Building, Times Square, and Pie-In-A Diner. Crowds and lights made him seem taller, walk faster. That last night before he went home after 27 years, he stretched as tall as a young guy, reaching for the brass ring on a merry-go-round. Thank you all so much for your support. I know I speak for the entire peer group that we're very glad to have you and your time, and this has been a wonderful year. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you, Gabby. Yeah. Thank you all again for joining us tonight and listening to this amazing work. I hope that you'll watch for these folks and their work in journals, magazines, and hopefully at your local bookstore before too long. I think Jenny will pop back on as well if anyone has any questions or comments or needs anything, right, Jenny? Yeah, thank you again just for spending the evening with us. And thank you to my cohort. It was a pleasure getting to know you all as a group, but also just working with you each one-on-one. It was really an honor to watch these books kind of form and be ushered into the world. So thank you guys so much. And I hope you'll keep in touch. Thank you again.